The word blockbuster usually belongs to movie premieres and box office records, not personal confessions. Yet this time, it described the moment Sam Heughan finally broke a silence that had lasted far longer than anyone realized. The setting was calm, almost understated, which made the impact even stronger. There was no dramatic announcement, but the weight of what he hinted at landed like an unexpected explosion. What caught everyone off guard was not the tone, but the timing. Sam had lived for years under constant speculation, yet he always chose restraint over reaction. Now, without warning, he allowed a piece of the truth to surface, and fans instantly sensed this was not damage control or promotion. It felt like a line he had crossed only because he could no longer justify staying quiet. The moment he mentioned Dakota Johnson, everything shifted. Not because of what he said directly, but because of how carefully he framed it. His words carried the weight of correction rather than revelation, as if he were setting something straight rather than confessing to something new. That distinction immediately sparked confusion and intense curiosity. For years, Dakota's name had floated around Sam in a cloud of rumor and assumption. Fans connected dots that were never officially drawn, building narratives out of coincidence, proximity, and imagination. Sam had always let those stories exist without interference, trusting time to dissolve them. This time, however, he seemed determined to reclaim the narrative, even if it meant disappointing people. The so-called shocking truth did not sound like scandal in the traditional sense. It sounded more like clarification, the kind that dismantles myths instead of creating them. Sam's demeanor suggested relief rather than fear, as though speaking now was easier than continuing to let misunderstanding grow. That alone made fans question everything they thought they knew. Social media reacted instantly, but not in one unified direction. Some fans felt stunned, interpreting his words as the collapse of a long-held fantasy. Others felt vindicated, believing the truth finally aligned with what they had suspected all along. What united both sides was the realization that silence had allowed fiction to become far more powerful than reality. The atmosphere around the reveal felt strangely intimate for something so public. Sam did not offer details, timelines, or emotional explanations, which only deepened the intrigue. Instead, he spoke with the calm finality of someone closing a door rather than opening one. That restraint made it clear he was not interested in fueling drama, only in ending confusion. What made this moment feel blockbuster-worthy was its impact, not its volume. One carefully chosen truth unraveled years of speculation in seconds. Fans were forced to confront how easily they had filled gaps with assumptions, mistaking mystery for meaning. The shock did not come from betrayal, but from realizing how wrong the story might have been. As the dust settled, one thing became clear. This was not the full story, but it was the beginning of honesty. Sam Heughan had finally spoken not to create headlines, but to correct them, and that choice alone changed how the narrative would move forward. Whatever the truth fully contains, it no longer belongs entirely to rumor. As fans tried to process what Sam had finally put into words, the meaning of the shocking truth began to take shape more clearly. It was not a revelation of secret romance, nor a confession of hidden feelings, but something far less dramatic and far more disruptive. The truth Sam hinted at was that the story people believed for years was never the real one. In allowing assumptions to grow unchecked, a narrative had formed that no longer resembled reality, and correcting it had become unavoidable. The connection with Dakota Johnson had always existed in a strange in-between space. They shared moments that were warm, respectful, and easy to misinterpret, especially in an industry that thrives on chemistry and proximity. Fans and media alike took fragments and assembled them into something larger, something emotionally charged. Sam's revelation suggested that what people saw as intimacy was, in fact, misread familiarity. What made the truth feel so jarring was how long the misunderstanding had lasted. Years of silence had allowed speculation to harden into belief, and belief into certainty. Sam had trusted that time would erase the noise, but instead it amplified it. By the time he chose to speak, the myth had become more powerful than the facts. This realization forced fans to confront an uncomfortable question about their own role. How much of the story was built on evidence, and how much on desire? It became clear that the shocking element was not hidden behavior, but collective projection. Sam's calm delivery made it obvious he wasn't exposing anyone, only dismantling a fantasy that had grown far beyond his control. The emotional response shifted noticeably once that perspective set in. Disappointment surfaced, not because of betrayal, but because an imagined narrative was ending. For some fans, letting go of that story felt like losing a piece of personal investment. Sam's honesty disrupted a shared illusion, and illusions are often cherished more fiercely than truth. What stood out was Sam's refusal to assign blame. He didn't criticize fans, deny affection, or distance himself harshly from the past. Instead, he framed the truth as a necessary correction, not a dramatic reckoning. That restraint suggested maturity rather than defensiveness, reinforcing the idea that this was about closure, not spectacle. Industry observers noted how rare this kind of clarification actually is. Most celebrities either ignore rumors entirely or address them with blunt denials that fuel further debate. Sam chose a middle path, acknowledging confusion without feeding controversy. In doing so, he reclaimed ownership of his narrative while refusing to sensationalize it. The ripple effects were immediate but subtle. Media coverage softened, shifting from scandal-driven headlines to reflective commentary. Fan discussions became quieter, more introspective, with fewer theories and more acceptance. The story lost its explosive edge precisely because the truth removed the mystery that sustained it. This moment also reframed Sam's long-standing privacy. What once appeared evasive now looked protective, even responsible. He wasn't hiding a secret relationship, he was shielding real human connections from distortion. The truth revealed that silence was never deception, but an attempt to avoid feeding an incorrect story. As days passed, the Blockbuster label took on a different meaning. The impact wasn't measured in outrage or clicks, but in resolution. One statement had untangled years of misunderstanding, reminding audiences that not every unanswered question hides a dramatic secret. Sometimes, it hides a simpler reality that was ignored because it wasn't exciting enough. In the end, Sam's revelation closed more doors than it opened. It ended speculation, cooled fantasy, and replaced assumption with clarity. The shocking truth wasn't about Dakota Johnson, or even about Sam himself, but about how easily stories grow when silence fills the gaps. And once spoken aloud, that truth quietly returned the narrative to where it should have been all along, grounded, human, and real. That realization lingered long after the headlines moved on. Many fans began to see how easily admiration can slip into expectation, and expectation into entitlement. The desire to know everything about someone you admire can quietly override respect for their boundaries. In that sense, the story became a lesson as much as a revelation. There was also a quiet shift in how Sam himself was perceived. Not as a figure surrounded by mystery, but as someone who had deliberately chosen restraint in an environment that rewards oversharing. His decision to finally speak did not weaken his image, but added a layer of authenticity to it. Silence, it turned out, had been his way of staying honest. Ultimately, the most surprising outcome was the calm that followed. Once the truth was acknowledged, there was nothing left to chase or decode. The story settled into something simpler and more human, stripped of fantasy and exaggeration. And for many, that grounded ending felt far more satisfying than any shocking rumor ever could.